Hello, welcome to the Peter Repeater, episode 44. This is the live video version if you're on YouTube, or the recorded audio version if you're on a podcasting streaming software. All over the internet, lots of chances for people to listen, and hopefully we'll get there. And I did get into a swing of this live streaming every day. I did it every day for quite a long time. It was going all so well. And then I took a day off, put a day on, took a day off. And it's just that it's not going swimmingly. Maybe I've been a little bit distracted by cryptocurrency, things going up and down, and realising how I know absolutely nothing. So I've got my guy on YouTube who looks at all the trends, and he's clever. So whenever he recommends it, I'll go for it then. But right now it's just a little bit sketchy. The whole Bitcoin situation. It's just you don't know whether things are going to go up or down. This guy seems to think that things could go down, so I just got to beware about that. So what have I been up to talk about today? Almost nothing. I just almost nothing. I played Go with my friend. That was fun. I realised that I'm not very good at Go, but that's okay. It's like chess, but harder, and something that I try and put all my brain energy into it, and then realise that I'm not doing very well. But you've spent 2 hours playing, so there you go. Yeah, so today is an exciting day. I've planned to be on a podcast. I'm planned to be a guest on this Winning Loses podcast, and I'm very excited about that. And obviously it's the start of something new, something special. And usually they talk about sports, very complicated stuff, like the NFL draft and all the all the complicated business to do with that. And then I asked, do I need to do some research? And I was ready to go away and study the American sports that I have no idea about. And he said, no, we'll just talk about your podcast. And how I came across him on Twitter. He was like, so what do you talk about in your podcast? And I'm like, because in the back of my mind I know that I talk about nothing. So well, I don't have anything planned, let's just say that. I just talk about my day during the lockdown, and not much happens. So that is what's happening. So what's my podcast about? I said I talk about my day, talk about my life, and I talk about other people's podcasts. Very, very interesting, really. Just a whole variety of topics, really. What I've listened to and what I've done, which is just listening to stuff. So I'm surprised I've done so many podcasts. No idea, no recollection of what has been said. And then I've got the added pressure now that there's the audio version of this, so things are recorded more so than just on YouTube. So so there you go. But hopefully it'll be a little bit more relaxed. You know, this podcast can go. I can it can, not go so well, or I don't know if it's ever gone well, but I can just talk about stuff I'm interested in and not have a pressure. But this evening I'm going to be on someone else's podcast, and I'm thinking it might go really well because it's probably easier to talk to people, but then I haven't met them before. But it's just somebody else's podcast I can screw up. But it's an opportunity, and I'm looking forward to it. So hopefully that goes well. So I'll tweet that winners losers podcast on anchor.fm, and I'm going to be on there 6 p.m. Eastern time, which is 11 p.m. I'm going to be on 6 p.m. Eastern time, so it's 11 p.m. today's time. So that's the what I'm looking forward to this evening. So they asked me, what do I talk about in my podcast, and then they said, oh, you don't need to research sport, you'll be fine. We'll just talk about your podcast. Great. Brilliant. I don't know what my podcast is really. I don't know what it's about. I'm not sure if it technically has to be about anything, but it's just a myth really. I just think, well, it's me talking, and I talk about other people's podcasts, as I have been so far, and I just got to think. So what did you talk about in your last podcast? What did you get up to? What can we fill our podcast with? It's like, I talked about how I'm looking forward to your podcast, and how I'm realizing that I have no specific topics of my podcast, no specific themes. I've got nothing happening, so I just have to really make stuff up. So that's why I thought, after my day off podcasting, day on day off sort of thing, I just thought, well, I'll have a day on. I'll do my podcasting today, so I can at least say I've done a podcast today, and then we can talk about that. I was tempted just to leave it with my last podcast more, because I feel like I talked about some interesting stuff last podcast. But there you go. We'll just think about stuff today. So yeah, and they're comedians, so I'm gonna be on their hopefully on their wavelength and make fun, and hopefully I'll say some funny things. That's all I really care about, is just saying something funny, contributing, and then hopefully if things go well, I can collaborate with them again. I have to say it's a little bit exciting, the whole collaboration with other people on the internet, other podcasters, is something that I've really haven't done before. So hopefully I can do all that and make the most of my time as a aspiring podcast person. Can I say podcast one more time? Probably, no doubt. So what I've listened to today is a bit of Joe Rogan. I suppose yesterday was a really good one. I watched Tim Pool. He's an independent news person, reporter, and he was on the podcast. I really liked that because he had some interesting things to say about the coronavirus, and he was into conspiracies, and they did that whole thing. It's like, I'm not into conspiracies, but this is the conspiracy. Let me tell you all the stuff that I've obviously thought lots into, and yeah, it's just it's crazy conspiracies. Like the whole Bible is just stories of like some sort of sci-fi past where we used to have technology and we moved to this planet from another dying planet, and then we lost technology, and then our old scripture is just the leftover stories of this future advanced civilization, and they're talking about how science is indistinguishable to magic when it's concerning like an advanced technology which you don't know about. Imagine like in the past people seeing helicopters and flying aeroplanes. Although you don't get any other type of aeroplane, but just helicopters and aeroplanes flying across the sky, and like what are they? They'd be magic to them. It'd be godlike powers, but we just do it with advanced in technology and stuff like that. So it's talking about how aliens could do that to us and how they could have done it in the past. And then there's other conspiracies saying how they're already influenced us and they saw us as primates and like apes, and just injected us with their DNA to progress us as a human species, and all these crazy conspiracies. It's just the thought of we could move to Mars and then destroy that planet, move back to Earth and just destroy that planet and keep it terraforming and jump across planets, really. And all these thoughts of what all these alien stuff mean, and Bob Lazar as a name or something, and all these crazy things going on. It's just I don't think there's aliens. Don't think there have been aliens, but you get into the conspiracies. But then I'm doing it now. I'm saying these conspiracies definitely aren't true, but here's the conspiracy. They do it a little bit more extreme. They go really into it. And Joe Rogan has this thing about being high on marijuana and how you can get crazy ideas. And this guy Tim Pool, he was having some. I'm trying not to say the word crazy. He was having some really strange, out the box ideas, and he was like, "Are you high? You should be high. You'd be stranger if you were high, crazier." Yeah. So I should probably give up on cryptocurrency. Probably. It's fun. Up down, up down, up down, and then there's lots of things happening, and then you can check it all the time. You might not get notifications from Twitter and Instagram or Facebook, but you can always get notified about the cryptocurrency, and it's really interesting. But obviously I'm just watching this guy's video, something like Skinny Moon Hunter or something. He's really good, and he just keeps on saying patience, wait like 3 months until things are being oversold, and you can focus on when the right times to invest and everything. It's really interesting. So obviously that's what I'm gonna talk about on my podcast. With this guy, I just hope I can, on the podcast I'm doing with these Americans, I just hope I can bounce off them and say stuff, and it'd be a good podcast. one can only hope. And then the fact that they're saying, I've said it before, it's just repeating myself at this point, but it's just they said talk about my podcast. It's like, okay. Well, in my podcast I talked about talking about my podcast, and that's all I did. Let's talk about that. Insane. So we're just gonna try and test the water a little bit, and hopefully have some things to say. And so Tim Pool, he was cool. There's all this news reporting, people having like biased views and not telling the truth, and being on the social justice warriors and going with the audience and not going with the facts. And that's why this guy left reporting for news people and went independent. Now he's really successful, and then he talks about he likes working all the time and doesn't like doing anything else. He just can't. He just likes working all the time, so he never has a day off. He does 3 hours and 40 minutes of content across his 3 channels every day, and then like half that, an hour and 40 on Saturday and Sunday, just every day. And then he says he has to do I don't know how he fits in the time, but like on a Saturday for an hour and a half content, he'll do like 10 hours of research. So there's a lot to do. Lots and lots to do with the research. Like Joe Rogan was like, oh, you don't work a full week, you're only doing 3 hour 40 minute work a day. But he's like, no, it's a full day of research. I don't know how you be a news person yourself, because I know how you get news from reading the news and then you tell the other people, but then what do the reporters do? Where do they get their news from? I've thought that before. How does the news story originate? They almost have to observe something, or can you just look into a news story and give your own take? That's probably what they do. Just something happening, and then look at and then read around it, and then give your own version of it. Is probably more likely. You don't actually have to witness the news story in person to be able to give a unique story. Yeah. So that's Tim Pool for you. And then the person I did 2 good podcasts in a row there. Though Joe Rogan doesn't always have good podcasts, but yeah, somebody called Jessie May. And that was a good podcast because it was a 3 hour 24 minute podcast, and usually he stops after 3 hours because it's too long. But it went on 3 hours 24 minutes. Listen to that whole thing, and then and that was a really good podcast. They were talking about everything. They're talking about society and coronavirus and really interesting stuff. It's like reading a book. Not much of it sticks with you, but just the odd thing you listen and take in. And then when they say stuff in the podcast, you recognise if they've said it before. It's like watching a TV show. You don't remember it in a year's time, but if you were to watch it in a year's time, you know that you've watched it before. It's a special place in your brain that absorbs stuff but you can't recall off the top of your head. I know what I'm going to talk about with or maybe this just doesn't fit in with the comedy. I just want to talk about simulation, robots and consciousness. That's what I want to talk about. It's just so let's talk about it now. And then they're like, what did you talk about? Oh, I talked about this. Yes. So I've got something else rather than just saying I talked about not having stuff to talk about in my podcast to talk about in your podcast. We'll move on from that. So now we're just talking about something now, so that we have something to talk about that was said in my podcast that can be said on their podcast, relating back to my podcast. I don't know if I'm really saying that efficiently, but there you go. So podcasting. Yeah, so the simulation was it consciousness. And my friend asked me, what is consciousness? And obviously I couldn't really answer that question. I was like, it's being awake. It's like having the lights on, being able to perceive the existence. And then that in itself is sort of sidestepping saying words that just mean the same as consciousness. But it's the best I can do. And then my friend was saying what he thinks that consciousness is just sort of your brain and the particles in your brain and the arrangement of everything and everything in your brain, and then that's really it. So if you copied and pasted your brain and had an exact copy, then that would also be you. And I'm like, nope, and I don't think it's a difference in opinion. I just think my friend is wrong here, because it wouldn't be you, because you can't leave your consciousness and go into the other consciousness. You're stuck where you are, and that person's stuck where they are. Now you've got two consciousnesses. You've got two of them. So, and then I just thought, well, if the other guy keeps on living and then you die, your existence, your consciousness ends, and the other person might continue and they might be exactly like you, but that's just different to you. But they were like, nope, it'd be the same. I think their logic breaks down, because I was like, because I was thinking, well, if you got transported and the particles were recreated in another space and your particles were annihilated, your consciousness would turn off, the other person would turn on. And I think that's right, because that just makes sense. But my friend was like, well, it would still be you. It's hard to argue because of don't really know what consciousness is, but I just think it's just logic, really. It sounds like I definitely know what I'm talking about. So but then I said he wasn't happy with getting annihilated and being created somewhere else, and I was thinking that wouldn't be you, and he thinks, well, it would. And I said, well, what if what if you got copied? You got two of you. You're not the same as each other, are you? You're like twins. You're not the same. You're here. The other person's over there. These two consciousnesses, and then a year later, instead of getting you getting annihilated immediately, a year later you get hit by a bus and die. Well, you're dead. The other person keeps on living. So in the same way, when anyone dies, their conscious life ends. In that same way, if you got uploaded to the internet, if you got uploaded to the cloud as an AI robot with your brain preserved, that wouldn't be you. In that your conscious would end as you die and the person would keep on living. It'd be great, because there's another conscious entity living, and it would continue, but it wouldn't be you. So that's why you just got to be careful with thinking that you can live forever with living as a robot. So I said maybe the only way, I've heard this before, is because if you change one of your brain cells with an artificial brain cell that didn't die of age, if you just did one change of a brain cell, you'd still be you. You've just changed one brain cell. And then if you do that one at a time, at no point would you change who you are. You're still that same person. So if you change all of them one at a time, and then you've got if you do it gradually instead of cut and paste, if you do it gradually to artificial inside your own brain, then your brain is still preserved and interconnected and everything. And because you've done it gradually, your consciousness is still the same and it still exists, and then you could live forever. So that's the idea, is that maybe the only way to do it is gradually. But it's all a little bit tenuous because, as I said earlier, you can't explain what consciousness is. So it's hard to fully have logic around it, because I have to admit the whole sense of me being me, and if I die, that's the end. And if I was created somewhere else, it wouldn't be me. That's just sort of like a feeling, an intuition. And I think a lot of people agree with that, but it's still like, it's not provable. It makes so much sense, and it must be, it just makes sense that if there's another brain somewhere else, it doesn't suddenly become you. But maybe it's just a loophole of the universe that whenever... No, I'm not having it, because if there's two of you, the other guy's not you. You don't exist in two places. And then you bifork and diverge and you become two different people. And my friend was trying to say, well, that would be you up until the point you got copy and pasted. But nope, it's not you. Proven. You can't cut and paste into a computer being and have your consciousness remain intact. That's the lesson that I've learned through pure speculation. But if you did it gradually, brain cell by brain cell, then maybe your consciousness would be intact. But then what difference is there by doing it brain cell by brain cell and your brain still being there, and then just doing it brain cell by brain cell, just artificially from scratch, like a 3D printed? It's all a little bit tenuous. Like, just the process of how you convert to a computer remains how you can remain the same conscious being. But at this stage in technology, there's no saying that we can artificially create the same neuron to preserve consciousness. We might just create a computer that acts and performs like us, but isn't us. And I was thinking that maybe it's not enough just to emulate our being at a particular level. Maybe we need something a little bit more. Maybe we need maybe there's some deeper energy. You need the deeper fabric of the universe, like the darker matter, and you need everything combined. You can't artificially create that, and it's impossible to do so. And I'm more inclined to think like that, because I don't think humans can create conscious beings. But then if you argue, this is the counter argument, if you argue that animals are conscious, which I think they are, because there's no reason for them not to be, well, they're simpler. And then how far down do you go? Are the insects conscious? Well, yes, they are. And then you go down to, these microorganisms, they have senses, they're conscious in some way. Okay, yeah, they are. And then you're like, well, these are really simple to create. We might not be able to create a brain, but we can create this. And then if there's no physical difference between the artificial microorganism and the real one, and if there's no physical differences, then maybe they're both the same and they both have the same level of consciousness. And if it works at a basic level like that, like atomically at a small microscopic level, then you can scale it up and it works on a whole level. So and then like there's the whole question of, well, if a computer acts and thinks and does everything the same as you and is sure in itself that it's consciousness, that it's conscious like we are, then if the computer's sure and it's telling the truth, then if it can tell the truth, if it thinks it's conscious and there's no physical difference between us and them, us and the computer, and we think we're conscious, then who's to say that we're conscious and they're not? Because they might think, well, we're conscious and they're not. So it's just whole bizarre. I'm not sure if computers can become conscious, but perhaps they already are. Like the bacteria can have a small sense of consciousness and can detect and perceive something. Maybe being a computer right now, being your smartphone or your laptop, maybe that means something. Maybe that that level of complexity has a consciousness that arises, and it can't talk to us right now to confirm its own conscious self. And maybe when you crack a phone and the screen breaks, maybe it hurts a little bit. You don't. It's impossible to tell. But this is where, I think the human is a little bit deeper than just artificial stuff, because I believe in God, and I think we create things, and I think God create things or gives it life, and I think it's a little bit more special than just turning on a switch and everything's all as vivid as our reality. But then you get into this tenuous zone again of like, I've just got some logic out of consciousness, let's get some logic out of reality. It's like, can you ever, when you can't even say what reality is? So but then it's the same with everything. You have these basic assumptions and basic asymptotes. No, I don't know if they're asymptotes. Whatever they're called when they're the basic things of like maths, the basic assumptions. Like the whole maths works, but then you have to, agree that 0 has no value and plussing means adding value, and just like basic stuff that you just have to assume, basic laws of maths, and then you build something up on that. So my whole idea of what consciousness is and what reality is, you just have like a basic assumptions like God exists, and then you build everything up on that. I assume that I exist, and I assume God exists, so I sort of, even though I might have a deep sense, an intuition, and it's still like not provable, so you sort of have these basic core assumptions and core beliefs, and then you build everything up on that, and your whole worldview is dependent on those things. And it's just whether it matters if those things are right, or do you even need to know that they're right? I don't know what I'm saying, but do you even need to know what reality is to be able to understand reality? Probably not, because of science. And yeah, we all take things for granted. So it's hard to know if you're ever right, really. so many things to be wrong about, and it's just a constant battle between being right and wrong, but then being wrong is fine. It's fine. So there's my little thing about consciousness. Something that I've talked about, that I can talk about with these Americans on this sports comedy. So that topic was completely unrelated to their podcast, but if I'm not going to do my research, and if we're going to talk about my podcast, then we're going to talk about my podcast. We're going to talk about robots. I feel like I should do preparation. I should, because they've got different segments. They've got at the end they do bad advice, which is a bit funny. They do bad advice for everyone. I think they could be a little bit more creative, but then no doubt I'm listening. It's easy to be a listener and critique stuff, but I don't listen to my own podcast necessarily, so they can critique me. But it's just I just hope I bring my A game. Just bring that comedy on to the podcast and give some bad advice. I'll probably offend some people, you know. So obviously with their 5 listeners, which is I don't know what they mean by that, whether that's 5 total listens, which is comparative to sort of my audience, or 5 listeners subscribed, or 5 listeners on the go, or I don't know, whatever if it's actually 5 people who keep on coming back to the podcast and they give me a shout out for me being on their podcast, then things will go well, and maybe I get a couple more listeners on my podcast. That's the dream. And all because of Twitter. All because I tried to follow for follow, and I found someone to do a podcast. And obviously I've come back here for my next podcast and I'll be like, yeah, it didn't happen. They weren't ready. But no, they've done 5 podcasts in a row every week, and they started it in the coronavirus lockdown, and I more or less have done the same. And I've done 44, they've done 5, but it's not competition. It's slow and steady wins the race with their 5 listeners. Yeah. And they give me a shout out, and then if their podcast does really well, and then I can be a frequent guest, then my podcast can do well, and things get exciting. And then we can start, start making a living for myself. Obviously, it's probably just going to be a hobby for however long I keep on liking it for. So hopefully it'll be a hobby for the next few years. But then I'm just hoping that I don't ever work again, and hoping this turns into a profitable business, just enough to pay the bills and everything. So I appreciate the listen, the watch. I don't exactly know how long I've been on for. I'm a bit tentative to look to my side because I can know that can end in disaster. I haven't figured out how to look into the lens of my camera after hours and hours of talking in front of it, but then I am pretty bad with eye contact anyway. But I'm certainly not looking over at my laptop. We can avoid that catastrophe. I tried to do it once or twice, but I did it all the time before. So we'll look forward to the future. This lockdown's still happening. Not watching the news, which is pretty cool. Get all my information from some American comedians with their perspective on, life in California. I know more about California coronavirus news than I do about my own country, really, because I haven't watched the news in my country, but I watched many podcasts from all California. So we'll consider all those things, and I'll just tell you a little couple of things at the end. I appreciate the view. Hopefully I'll do more podcasts in the future. Keep an eye out, subscribe and everything. And just to say, today I'm gonna be on somebody else's podcast, and I'll tell you about that so you can find it if you keep an eye out for it. I'll tell you now, it's called Winning Losers, and and it's on Anchor.fm, which distributes it to loads of podcast stuff. And I'm going to be on their podcast, and hopefully it will be good. They're comedians and presumably like low-level comedians, but then I'm a non-level comedian, so hopefully I can contribute to their podcast, give some bad advice, I don't know, talk about sports I know nothing about, and then we'll just I tried to skyrocket my career. It's not going to be a career, it's just something I like doing at the moment, and that's all it might ever be, but that'll be okay, that'll be happy with me. So just to leave you with everything, thank you for watching, thank you for listening. Look out for more podcasts on this channel, on this podcasting channel. So I'm trying to think what I usually say, I haven't done it in a while. So it's the Peter Repeater on YouTube and Anchor.fm and Spotify and everything. And then my book on Amazon is, let's see if we get it in focus. It is An Unbelievable God by Peter Newing, Newing. So that's on Amazon. It's a good read. And then I'm a bit biased. And then Twitter at the Pete Repeater, Instagram at Peter Newing. And thank you for watching. Keep an eye out for more things to come. I appreciate it. Alright, till next time. Bye for now.